Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF everything in that shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF everything. Spoiled rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And it's Ben
on Spoiled Rotten.
on that shelf.
Boom. We're back to revisiting the MCU.
Mhm.
And I mean, obviously also DCEU, because our Man of Steel episode is out by now. So we're doing both at the same time.
Mhm.
But we've hit an MCU movie. We're on Avengers Age of Ultron, the second let's get the whole gang together movie.
Yeah, the combo movie where they officially had to be called combo movies back then.
Yeah. Oh boy. Well, I guess this is probably the least I've liked the movie during this rewatch.
Yeah.
I thought I was gonna like it more, but I was kind of like, nah. I think my big takeaway was I don't like how Cap is written in this movie. Like, I think they set him off on the wrong foot right away when he's like, hey, language, and he becomes like and I don't mean quip in like a smart ass way, but it's like it feels the most like they're just writing him to sound like a comic book. Like there's that thing where like Ultron's talking to him, but he beats him up and he's like, what, you didn't finish, and stuff like that, where I'm like, nah, not it didn't feel like they leaned into his humanity, which I think is a big part of what made me like him as a character for all these movies. This is the least invested in him as a human being. They have a brief moment with Sam, which I liked, where you're like, oh wow, like he's really looking into Bucky and trying to figure that out, but also like trying to keep Sam like interested in like, oh, like, have you found a place? And he's like, it's too expensive, whatever. Like, I like that stuff, but other than that, he's kind of just like there for the sake of having him there.
I think the issue with Captain America, and the Russo brothers said it so eloquently as their justification for why they underwrote him or didn't include him as much in Infinity War, when they're like, every time you put him in a scene, it's hard to make it not about Captain America, right? So I don't know if that was just Joss Whedon's less successful way at diverting that, making it so that it's okay, you have Captain America on screen, but in order to make it less about Captain America, you have to kind of turn him into a joke, or at least make him joke, or make him the butt of comic relief, which I feel like Whedon does a lot more than any other director, which to me, I'm like, yeah, okay, well, quippy is Whedon's style, but
Whedon?
Yeah, Whedon. Sorry, I say things weird, but
yeah, no, I mean, maybe I don't think that works for the movie though, because the movie is,
I agree with you.
One, Ultron's whole idea is like, yeah, they have a group, but they're not unified, and so using Wanda to keep them not unified is a big thing, but also like you're also looking into their deepest, darkest fears. That's kind of what's driving people's decision making here. Everyone gets a moment to be afraid. I don't think the Thor stuff is that successful, as I've said before, but you're still like, there's this thing where he's like, I've lived all this time and I'm just learning about this stuff now. Like, I don't like that. I need to look into this. So that drives him to just leave for a bit of the movie. Again, I don't think that's successful, but at least you're like, you understand that he has something that he's invested in. Just obviously the Nat and Bruce stuff, and you really get into it with them and their histories and how they feel like they can't operate properly. Tony specifically being like, holy shit, I saw a future, and I know that she didn't show him the future, she just showed him his worst fears, and he projected, oh, my worst fear is everyone dying, and that pushes it. But you don't get that with Steve. You get like, oh yeah, like he's a guy that can't live without war, which we already had a feeling about, but it doesn't get explored beyond just naming it.
Yeah.
Everyone else is exploring what is making them afraid. And I think Tony even says kind of like, yeah, you kind of walked away from that unscathed. I don't like that. You haven't seen your dark side. He's like, well, yeah, you just haven't seen it yet or whatever. But like, again, it's just kind of naming it without getting into it. And I feel like that what you explained could be true, but it didn't really make sense for this movie because this was the movie to get into it.
Yeah, because well, you and I think both agree on the fact that successful movies show us, not tell us.
Yeah.
And in the situation of Captain America, yeah, you're right. We were told as an audience by Ultron, which makes it a little less credible, from the audience's perspective.
Well, I mean, you still see it when Wanda gives him his vision and he's dancing with Peggy and she's like, it's over now, we can dance, and he's still kind of like, I don't know what that.
Yeah, it's like, I'm uneasy about this. I don't.
Yeah, like I don't really know.
Having
so they did show us, but it's just like no, that it just lives in that scene as opposed to everyone else who like plays out with. And I missed Hawkeye, but obviously his thing was like, do I actually belong with these people? And then finding out what that his wife explaining, like, they need you, and that's what's scary. It's not about you need them, it's that you help ground them and everything. So everyone gets to explore something in this movie but Cap, I feel. And I think that for me on this watch through hurt the movie.
I agree with you, and I like that you brought up Hawkeye because I was definitely thinking about this, right? After watching the scene where he gives Wanda the talk, like, and there's like, hey, once you leave this door, like, hey, I have a job to do, I can't do what a babysitter, like that whole like spiel of like, if once you walk out this door, it doesn't matter what you did, it's that if we fight with us, you're an Avenger kind of thing.
Yeah,
he's doing what Cap should have done. Like, you know what I mean? I'm like, that's what Cap's moment should have been. The idea of like, I feel like the point of visiting Hawkeye's family, other than, learning more about Hawkeye and having these beats in the movie and all this kind of stuff that really allow these characters to talk to each other. At no point is Captain America able to pull people together the same way Hawkeye is. Because Hawkeye's like, okay, we'll go to my place. We'll hang with my family. We'll do this. And then when Tony and Steve are on the farm, and Tony, both being the stubborn characters that they are, just keep debating it out. You know what I mean? It's not like there's the same effort to like, hey, let's bring it together. Here, I came with a cup of tea, for example. You know what I mean? Like, it's a truce kind of talk. Instead, no, we're chopping wood and hiding our masculinity or whatever it is. It's just, I feel like you're right. Captain America does get a very, very big misunderstanding in this, because I felt like his compelling thing should have been like, okay, without war, I can still keep this family together.
Yeah.
And
I think
it misses that.
What I liked was I hope I said it during our Captain America episode, which is for me, the through line with Steve was, how does he not turn into the Red Skull? Like, how does he keep his humanity? Like, he got all these powers, and how does he keep what, like, Erskine Smith, that's not his name, Doctor whatever, like, the doctor played by Stanley Tucci, like whatever that guy saw in him,
the guy that tried to give him peach schnapps.
Yeah. How does he keep that? That's the through line. And this movie, and he doesn't have to be consciously aware of that, even though I think he is throughout the movies. But this movie, as I said, was the movie to like put pressure on that, and it seemed to not be interested in that. And it's a weird omission, considering it's not like I was like, oh, well, only like a couple of them actually get to have a highlight. Everyone has their moment, and I'm not even saying all of it's successful. I'm just saying the movie engaged with everyone but Captain America in that sense.
You're right.
I feel like even War Machine gets stuff in this, which is, am I the butt of the joke?
Yes,
he has that mini arc during the party of like telling the story to Tony and Thor and being like, wow, these guys do not care about what I have to say.
Just unfazed.
And then trying to play it off to like the civilians, and they laugh, and like you can see him playing it on his face of like,
Yeah.
Is this better? I think he's actually, there is a moment of got it, but then also
Yeah.
like reflection on like what is
He's
this what
like,
I
yeah,
want though?
which audience am I impressing right now? Who do I want more of this reaction from? The civilians or the people that I want to fight alongside with?
Yeah, and then it's a big deal when he comes in at the end
Absolutely.
to not, and I
Huge.
sorry, I just shouldn't say he comes
Yeah.
during the final fight to
Mhm.
like he's kind of why Vision undercuts that, but initially the fact that he's like the safeguard to like keep the sentries from leaving,
Yeah.
and he's taking them down, like that idea that he's like, yeah, I'm part of this, like I'm not second tier in that sense, like I'm still
Yeah.
part of what they're doing.
But the funny thing is, like, when you say like, yeah, I'm part of this, I'm still not second tier, Tony just like straight up goes like, okay, Avengers beat the church tower. And then he's like, you stay here and you
that
watch.
happens before though, but
I know, but
I think
it's
all
almost
I'm saying
right
is they
there
still
and then.
interacted with
Yeah.
we just wanted to call him Don Cheadle. They still interacted with Rhodes more than they did Cap, in my opinion, in terms of actually digging into their fears.
Like the whole Cap stuff almost got sidelined entirely.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's when you bring up the idea of War Machine, I'm like, yeah, you're right. War Machine was a good perimeter defender, but why isn't Falcon there? You know what I mean? Like Falcon.
Well, he says, I still think they got into it with him. He's like, yeah, I just pretend like I want to be a part of this. Like I'm happy to just do the non-hero stuff.
Right. I get that. But like at the end of the day, it's the idea that, you know, all hands on deck. If it was necessary, then he could have been there. But what I'm just saying is, like, it seems like everything associated with Cap was weaker to begin with. Right. They could have brought in Falcon.
I don't understand what you're saying. Like, I'm talking about Falcon, so I'm not attaching him to Cap in that sense. I'm
attaching to the Cap franchise in the sense where I'm attaching Rhodey to the Iron Man franchise of like, oh, they paid more attention to the Iron Man franchise by doing these things. And even though, well, Tony has to be integrated heavily through this because Ultron is his whole thing, right? But you don't get the real, like, there's scenes where you would hope that Cap would bring a better A game in regards to what he's bringing to that scene. So when he discovers again that Tony's redoing Ultron, he's like, shut it down. And there's no real actual argument like there is in Civil War, where he starts getting really developed and like the arguments and the perspective he brings to the table is much better. Like, I think a huge thing.
I think he states it in this movie as well.
He does,
it's not really about his fear. He's just in reaction to Tony.
Yes.
What I'm talking about is individual stuff. So that's why I didn't want to connect things. I'm talking about like, if you're talking about the individual characters, even Sam, his stuff is stated. Yeah. And I believe that you could watch like, oh wow, even War Machine joined in at the end and be like, I think I should be a part of this. That tracks for me, that he would be like, yes, because I always didn't like that about him, that he was like, oh, I just do what he does but slower. Like, he put himself below Steve, and that's what I liked about the show was it was his evolution from being like, well, I could never do what Steve does, and they layered in race, but it was still, as a character, how do you position yourself as different from the person you put on a pedestal, right? That's what I like. But in this movie, he still has him on the pedestal, so he's still like, well, no, you do the hero stuff, I'll just chase leads on Winter Soldier. And then at the end of the movie, when he's part of the Avengers, I can understand that he'd be like, you know what, I should just be part of this. I don't need to be sidelining myself. I can bring my own makes sense
thing to the table. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is about Cap is he does say the stuff of like, anytime someone tries to start a war before it's finished, or finish a war before it's started, it's trouble. And so he says that in this movie.
Yep.
And I think he evolves that argument in Civil War, but it's still the seeds there. And so everything to do with how he intersects with Tony's story is fine, because that's his role, but it's not about what he is dealing with himself.
Right. So one of the things I think he's also dealing with too, to add to this discussion, is the idea of war ending, right? I think there's a lot woven throughout this whole movie that indicates that this is their last hurrah. This is their
Yes.
last series of
There's a lot
missions
of
and all
them
that
being
kind of
like, I
stuff.
guess this is where we die.
Yeah, and not only that too, but Thor earlier in the movie, he's like, once I have the scepter, my time with y'all is done. Like I,
Mhm.
like I did this all to get the scepter. I got to get back to Asgard. I got to be with my people, that kind of stuff. Like there's a lot of like finality woven
Mhm.
throughout this whole thing, right? So the idea that the Avengers might be ending is something that he might be struggling with. But why didn't they show that a little bit better?
Well, because I don't think that's something he was struggling with. Those guys left, but then the end of the movie is him putting together the next iteration.
Right.
So I don't think he feels like,
Mhm.
oh, I have nothing else to do.
Yeah, but then that's just more of Ultron's thing being true of like, yeah, you can't live without awards. Like, yeah, you can't retire either with these people. You have to put together
Oh,
a new team.
I agree, but I
Yeah.
think that the if what you're saying is how come they didn't show it, it's because I think the idea is the movie wasn't interested in a struggle that he had. The movie was
Yes.
kind of just like, well, he's just going to keep doing this,
Right.
which isn't as interesting as everyone else's track. But
Well,
if that's
yeah.
what the movie's doing, it tracks to me that they didn't show him struggling with it because it wasn't really a
Right.
struggle for him. It was like, well, I can just keep making this happen forever.
See, that's the
I
part
can
that
do this all
bothers
day.
me. That's the part that bothers me is I feel like he should have struggled with it. I feel like he should have been like, okay, the trauma that I had after being frozen on ice and then woken up close to 100 years later and not knowing anyone, and then being able to work with these coworkers, having the best relationship realistically, because like even in like what's the other movie where like Natasha's riding him on getting a date with whatever
Winter
from
Soldier.
accounting, Winter Soldier. Yeah, he's like it they make it clear that he hasn't integrated into society at all. He's just gone from one mission to the next to the next. So the idea here, I feel like if he was so afraid of losing this family, this is why I felt like the Hawkeye scene should have been him, in the sense where he should have been more open to getting that family. But it only happens once the whole mission is done and he's like Avengers, and then you get that tease thing, right?
Mhm.
So I feel like everything about him, like if he did the Hawkeye thing, it would have been like, okay, he has grown. It's just less of a character arc. He's just now realizing he needs to accept and grow more people and all this kind of stuff within his lifetime, and embrace Natasha, and like, even though like Natasha got into his head and got into the team and all that kind of stuff, like that's what I felt like it should have been if he was to have a more successful storyline. But you're right, this movie is not interested in dealing with Cap. It's just interested in using him as a prop.
But also, I would say I don't think he has trauma from being frozen. I think the whole point of his character is he didn't have anything to do until he had a war.
Yes, but the point that's what I'm saying is that the war
But
for
that's what I'm
him is
saying, it's not
over. The
trauma.
trauma is coming in, or at least the reality is seeping in. Like that's maybe I'm projecting, but
Yeah,
like
I
it
think
feels
you're
like someone
projecting 'cause
that's losing something so dear to his identity would start to lose his own personality, right?
Again, I don't think he sees it as he's losing something.
Fair
I
enough.
think the trauma, like, yeah, if you're trying to play his like psychiatrist, yeah, you should be digging into that. But I don't think the movies are interested in that. I think
No, I'm agreeing with you on that.
I think the movie, and I'm not just talking about this movie. I think the movies are interested in, like, because that is his mode of, I just care about the wars. Is he ever going to lose that humanity that he had initially? That's what is more at stake, not in this movie, but I'm talking about in the movies in general. That's what's at stake. And you're right to say that, like, if he was the one that brought on Wanda and was like working with her, that would have played into him nurturing and like reaching out to people the same way he I shouldn't say nurtured for Sam, but at least like saw potential in him, and like they formed a bond like that. And the same way that he will continue to give Bucky 100 chances.
Yes.
So that makes sense. But what I do think does make a difference is that this wasn't a story about someone who ever felt connected. This is a story about someone who never felt connected to the world until he got the chance to do war, which is why it's important to recognize that that's why he's going to keep trying to to fight, because that's the only time he feels like he's worth something.
Right. Right, and
So
that's
it's not that he feels
Mhm.
like he lost time, because even
no, no,
in
no.
that
I'm
time
not saying that
before
he lost time though. I'm
even
just
in
saying
that
that
time
he's
before he was
losing his
frozen, he
identity.
wasn't part of anything really.
Right. And
He
that's what I'm
didn't.
saying. It's
Yeah,
not that he's losing time. That's not the trauma. The trauma is his identity will be slipping away with these missions being successful. You know what I mean? And
okay, yeah, I guess I would
the
need,
band
because I
disbanding.
don't think he feels his identity is slipping away. I think he
I
thinks his
That's what
identity
I'm
is the
saying
mission.
though. I'm saying that would have been more of an interesting actually exploring Cap arc if they wrote something like that. But I'm agreeing with you ultimately, and I'm just saying like, oh, it would have been interesting if they did this or if they did this. But
Mhm.
ultimately, what they did was, here's Cap, and we need a joke here, and let's get Chris Evans to flex a little bit of his humor muscle bone, and it works until it stops working because you realize like, wait, that's all you're giving him to do. That sucks. That really sucks because
Yeah,
everyone gets something to do except for like less successfully Thor. I would prefer Cap stuff over what Thor got though, because the Thor stuff to me is just so incoherent and so bad
yeah, I
from
don't
what they
like it.
left in.
I don't like it. And I know that was like right around the time that Chris Hemsworth was like, I'm done with this character. Like I don't want to do this. So
Yeah,
maybe that played into it. But
maybe.
yeah, I think the Cap stuff, I did like when he was talking to Bruce and he was like, hey, look, I am the poster child for waiting too long. Don't do that. Like if you have feelings for Nat, you
Yeah.
should go for it. I
Mhm.
liked that, but I feel like you could have given him that. At least was him intersecting with someone else's fears, but bringing some of himself into it, more than just like, hey, like Tony, we got to do the right thing. This was him actually playing on that stuff that he talked about in Endgame of like, oh, you need to get a life. Like Tony always pushing him to actually get a life
Yeah. Yeah.
beyond being a
Well,
soldier, and that
to be
this
fair,
scene
everyone
at
is.
least was him being like, yeah, like you should get a life beyond us avenging stuff.
Mhm.
So I liked that, but I still maintain like that's like a one bright spot in a movie where he doesn't really reckon with
Yeah.
what it is he is
How to be
afraid
a
of.
whole person,
Yeah, because that
basically.
is him being like, oh, I'm afraid that I put off too much stuff, but he never
Mhm.
really comes back to that and reflects on it for himself.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah,
um
he's like the whole franchise, all 10 movies, it's him not being interested in engaging in society truly or genuinely. Like he's taking notes, he's trying to explore it in his downtime if he has any, but he's just like, nope, priority is shield, priority is fighting, priority is this. So it's just like it's very difficult to explore his character until we get the Russos involved, because the Russos truly understand him not only individually but also in an ensemble. And I think that's the biggest thing, because the first Cap movie is very, very good. So they understood the essence of Cap, at
mhm.
least from the MCU standpoint. But it's just different directors being able to use him properly or improperly in this
Well, I'd say
situation.
it's more about the writing, which is Marcus
Yeah.
and McFeely.
Right. Right.
And they wrote all three Captain America movies.
Yes.
um so I wouldn't put it yeah, I would say
Fair.
that, yeah, I wouldn't put it just on the Russo brothers. I would say that the writers have a big part in that, and you see the difference. And I still think that you actually are dealing with Cap's anger in the first Avengers movie, which I like. That's
Mhm.
what I liked about the first Avengers movie. So it's not just, oh, the Russos came and say that. It's just this movie that I see is a blip, because every
Right.
other movie I actually think they are interested in showing you what he's dealing with.
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't think it just, yeah, I think this was the one movie that he shows up in for any meaningful period of time, because yes, he's in Thor the Dark World, but
Mm.
yeah, I think this movie that he shows up in, you're kind of like, they weren't for me anyway, as someone who became very invested in him, like from
Yeah.
rewatches and stuff. I do think that he's an interesting character that you get invested in. This one wasn't interested in that for whatever reason.
Mhm.
You might be right. Maybe it was Joss Whedon trying to reckon with, I don't know how to make it so he doesn't just absorb everything,
Mm.
but I think he should have tried harder.
Right. Yeah. I do agree with that. This movie didn't do Cap justice. It just didn't. And I fully agree with that.
I guess we can move on. So I think the other person that suffers is just in the one scene, but it's a rough scene, is Black Widow.
Yeah,
And
it's the sterilization stuff that she just
do you think
specifically
I'm the
uses
only
the
one who's
word monster.
so
Hate
I've
that.
seen,
Hate
and I
that.
don't remember it, so I'm not trying to be dismissive. I've seen people
Right.
say what that scene was supposed to mean, but
Right.
watching it again, I'm like, that's poor writing then, because her
Mhm.
talking about the sterilization is so close to her talking about being a monster that there's no way you wouldn't, reading that cold, think
Yep.
she means I'm a monster because I'm sterilized.
Yeah, there's no way that she can't mean that, and it does come down to word, right? It's just like if she said like you're not the like others see me as a monster too because of this, and like what I mean. Like if it was the wording of like others see me as opposed to I see myself as a monster because of this, it's
Like,
just
I
like
think it's all related to how she starts the conversation, which is,
yes,
I thought I was more than just a killing machine, but that was a dream. I'm just a killing machine. So she is referring to her being a killing machine as the reason she's a monster. The problem is they add the sterilization thing at the end of the thought so that it feels like she thinks that's what makes her the monster. But what she's saying is she is a monster because she feels she's just a killing machine, which doesn't
I
really
see what
play
you
out
mean.
in the rest of the movie.
Doesn't play
I'm
out at
I'm
all.
agreeing with you. The way
Yeah,
it's worded, there's no way you would think she didn't mean that.
yeah.
I understand the intent now,
Mhm.
but it's kind of like it didn't translate to screen.
Yeah, it's like did who did like they must have tested that, and the audiences must have been confused when they were like, wait, what? Or maybe it just
I
like
mean, I
was
think we also watch this, and this isn't why I like the least I ever have. I think it really is the Cap stuff. But you also throughout the movie see how weirdly sexual, uh, specifically Tony, is, but like talking about prima nocta, which is a really fucked up thing to put in a kids movie. Um, talking about, hey, are you and Bruce playing hide the zucchini? Just if you do this, I'll hold your own. There's a bunch of stuff going on there, and then there is
there's a
the
lot of
Nat and Bruce,
innuendos. Yeah.
but there's the Nat and Bruce stuff where it's kind of like talking about the physics of them having sex and how he can't do it and I can't have kids, or pulling off the thing that Gal Gadot didn't want to do, which was pulling him into her boobs when they're
Yeah.
on the ground. It seems like yeah, he was on a real horny kick this
Yeah.
movie, and I think adding the sterilization, while not sexual, is still getting into that reproductive stuff, which doesn't seem like any of it was handled well. It just feels like if
Mhm.
that was tested, I think he wouldn't care. He's like, yeah, I got my line in. I got to say my sterilization thing, and that's my mark I'm putting on Black Widow.
Yeah. It's I don't know what to think about this.
It's
Because
hard
of
because
course
it's
though it's
of
hard
who
because
it is.
exactly
It's who it is. It's who it
because
is.
of Sweden. It's just
Yeah.
like oh, you see like these stamps are very very clear on like a lot of his past work and all this kind of stuff, and like he's very very interested in exploring the dynamic of like teenagers and what they go through and that coming of age kind of aspect of everything, and it's hard to explore the sexuality side of things in an adult ensemble where they're coworkers basically. So
It's
it's just
hard
like
because
him trying to bring that energy in is so mismatched, and I was like I'm like, is this a Whedon thing or is this like him not knowing how to work with an age group other than teenagers and like that young aspect of everything? I'm just like, what's going on here?
I think so. I watched Buffy, but I didn't watch it like religiously.
Mhm.
And the more that comes out about him, the less I feel like this was like, oh yeah, he just really got the um content. It really did feel like him working through what he felt were like injustices about how he grew up, in all the ways that he builds up certain female characters,
Mhm.
and then who he has those female characters feel like they like so to build up Black Widow the way she is. And I do give him credit for giving her a lot more to do in the first Avengers movie. Um, so he's built her up, and then this off-screen thing happens with Bruce Banner, and when she talks about why she likes him, it's hard not to think about like, oh, this is how he sees like every woman should see him. Like he's not the jock that like he has all this capability to do stuff, but he would never. He's the sensitive guy, so that's why the hot girl likes him.
Yeah, it's basically incel energy.
Yeah,
It's
like so that all of that plays
incel
into
diet
this stuff
energy.
now. Because before I was like, I still thought it was weird because I only ever looked at it before I knew all that extra stuff about Joss Whedon. I only ever looked at it as like, I mean, to me, it looked like that trope of like, wow, that man broke the woman, like the woman that couldn't be broken, like the taming of the shrew type thing of like Bruce, like as Hulk, he genuinely scared and hurt Natasha in the first Avengers movie. So then that broke her, and now all of her guard is down with him, which I thought was icky, but I'm like, honestly, if that's the story, but as you can see, like that this is the only movie they deal with it. It's like a line in Infinity War, but it is just not ever dealt with again. And I hope that was because people were kind of like, I don't think this relationship came from a good place. I think we should move away from this.
Definitely trauma bonded. Like it's a trauma bonded relationship, but I mean, like you would expect it to be given both their scenario. Well, I mean, given her like upbringing and all that kind of stuff, because his was just like science dude, and then oops, I have anger. You know what I mean? It
would be if I felt like the trauma bonding thing. I know for sure there's an element of that for Natasha, but for Bruce, I think it's written, and that's just because of how I feel about Joss Whedon. It's written more like, oh, gee shucks, like the popular girl likes me. What do I do?
100%.
And less about like feeling like they had a shared experience and now they've bonded.
Yep. It is that like it's a weird way that it's a weird way to see it now. You know what I mean? Back then it was just like, oh, this is clunky. You know what I mean? We were like, oh, it didn't execute well. And that was all we thought about it. And now we're just like, this is just not good.
Yeah. I remember thinking like, oh, that sucks. He's not coming back before seeing the movie. And then watching it this time, I was like, oh, I'm so glad this is the last Joss Whedon movie.
Yeah. Because I was like,
I was really like, oh, thank goodness.
Like even where like the Hulk ends, I'm like, okay, so you're doing that thing where like if Joss Whedon is playing himself, like, oh shucks, like I'm this, but like I'm not gonna be with that like popular girl that everyone else likes. It's just like, so you're martyring yourself, or like, what are you doing here? Like, it's just like, I don't understand it. Why wouldn't you like? I would say
where Hulk gets left was probably studio intervention,
right? No, but what I meant, but it's just the way he does it. It's like, I
think he genuinely would have been like, no, I don't want to do this, and that's why he stepped away from doing more, because they were probably
okay, fair enough.
We need to get rid of him for a bit, so we can do this other stuff we want to do.
Yeah,
I don't think if he was left to his own devices, it would have ended that way.
Okay,
that's
fair. I just don't think he's interested in happy endings, Joss Whedon. So I'm like, to see this, I could totally see him on board with being like, yeah, okay, this is what it's like to be.
I don't know that it's a happy ending just because they're still together, because you still have to deal with everything they talked about in like Hawkeye's farm, like what she wants out of this and what he feels he can't give her is still something you would have to interact and deal with if they were still together, if they were still in the same place.
But this is what bothers me so much about that in general, is the idea of like, like for many people it does, but like the fact that a romantic relationship can only mean something if there's a child being produced is just so.
I'm not even talking about having a kid. I'm talking about the clear advances she's making for them to have sex, and him being like, I can't. And that is, I can only assume, tracking from the Incredible Hulk, where he can't have sex because it will turn him into Hulk. So
I mean,
that's all I'm not even getting into. It can only be a real relationship if they have kids.
right. But I mean, yeah, but
And at that point,
I guess that's where
if that's
he
something
goes, right? It's like, think this
yes,
through. This can't go there, and he brings up the kids and all that kind of
yes,
stuff. And
because he's pointing at the
yeah,
pictures and he's like, we can't have what Hawkeye has. And
right.
I think she's more like, I already know that we
I
can't
just
have
want to
kids because I'm
have,
sterile. I'm talking about I want to be physical with you.
yeah, I want
Yeah.
to be a
Yeah.
little tenderness. I get that. I get that. Um, I don't know. Showed him doing a lot of meditation exercises. Maybe he could just pick up some more meditation, sexual exercises. Maybe there's something in the Kama Sutra about suppressing your heart rate. I don't know.
Yeah. All I was saying was it wouldn't have been a happy ending just because he didn't go off world.
Yeah.
You still have the very real hurdles that they have to deal with.
Yeah. I get it, but it's yeah, whether or not that was studio intervention, because I get it. Like, he has to go to Ragnarok, and like that's gonna be good, right? Or we have to put him on ice because we don't know what we're gonna do with him realistically. Probably,
I think I was more like, we can't have two heavy hitters in Civil War. We can't
right. Yeah, having him in
Hulk
Civil
and Thor.
Wars. Yeah,
so they are
true.
gone.
Yeah, Civil War with Hulk and Thor would have been so bad, because it would just been like,
I don't know if it would have been bad, but like it definitely would have created some. It wouldn't have been for me as good of a movie because or I mean, I don't know. They would have had to have been iced in that movie somehow because it is what I like about it is it's so tied to that relationship between Steve, Bucky, and Tony. Like that, it's way more intimate than just, hey, like, do you want to tell people who you are and be part of the Sokovia Act? Or that's in there and it's good, but it is so tied to like this movie sets up like, oh yeah, they're not unified, but then Civil War is like, let's actually get them to fight about how ununified they are.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good, like, Thor not being there, I like it, as well as Hulk being there. I like it because it's just like, yeah, if you have those two on the debate, then during the fight, the showdown, someone should be dying because they're just so overpowered, right? So you have to remove that element of it, but also like when you have Teddy Ross, like is that his name, Ross? Theodore or Teddy or Thunderbolt Ross.
Thaddeus.
Yeah, Thaddeus. When you have him like going like, oh really? Where's Thor right now? And he's like, well, and then he relates it as like, well, I'd have hell to pay if I misplaced a 40 megaton nuke at work or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, those are very, very valid points. So him not being there makes sense. Yeah, I can see how this would be studio intervention to be like, no, Hulk can't be in the next one for this reason. That makes perfect sense. But I mean, like, it could also be Whedon energy that he's like, yeah, but I'm gonna make him sulk at the same time too. But yeah, I mean, whatever. Either way, getting to the Thor stuff here, though. I
guess if we have to.
Yeah, it's just like, well, we started off with like the weakness of that, not to revisit that scene, but the idea of like, he really feels like everything's just he's being put into place for a lot of different scenes out of necessity. Like especially when Vision's being reborn, because I'm like, whoa, we really haven't seen him since that whole like cave thing, and then all of a sudden he comes in, not even joins the debate, and just like thunders him up.
Yeah, he's like, no, he has to be alive. We're doing it.
It's just like,
I mean, I guess that's it. He did join. He picked a side, and he was like, I don't I'm mad at Tony, but this has to happen.
Yeah, but I'm like, what? I'm like, he wasn't. It just, how did he know what to do? Like all those kind of questions come up, and I'm just like, that really is the weakest part. Is like, okay, yeah, we get a cool visual of him using the thunder to power him up. That
doesn't feel like the weakest part to me. The weakest part is literally like, hey, we're at the farmhouse where we need to like figure out our stuff, and he's like, no, I'm out. That feels so weak to me. I'm just like, what? No.
True.
Why would you just let him leave? Like, what?
But I mean, I like what he says, though. At least he's like, there's things beyond your understanding. I need answers. I'm not going to get them here. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense to me. But I'm like, the idea that like no one can contact him and to be like, hey, you should come back. We need you right now. Like, that sucks.
I mean, for me, the movie comes to a grinding halt as soon as they get to the house. So I guess
that's true.
I completely lose interest once they're there. I know people really like it, but I'm like, I don't need this. None of this is interesting to me.
Yeah.
But so yeah, you could. I mean, yeah, sure, but to me, it still felt like the Kumail Nanjiani and Eternals. Like, yeah, I understand why he's leaving, but structurally for this movie, it's weird that you're leaving now.
Yes, just because it can be well explained, it does not mean it should be happening,
Yeah, like,
or that it's comfortable when it happens.
Yeah,
it's legitimately uncomfortable to see this. It's like, oh, we haven't seen Thor for about like 20 minutes, and he's just going to show up and know exactly what to do right now, and just instead of actually listening to everyone, just like do it.
Well, I would say this: if you were happy that he was like, I need to go get answers and left, then I think it would be stupid if he came back and was like, all right, well, now what do I do? Like, I think he would need, if you're saying that he left for a good reason, which was, I need to get answers that you guys wouldn't understand, then yeah, when he comes back, he needs to just do what he does. Otherwise, I'm right, and that was a dumb reason to just have him leave.
Yeah. It just seems to me, it's just like, maybe he'll come back like, oh, good, you're talking about this. I got some things to say too. Let's do this. And like, and I know that's less. It's a boring scene because like
it's
nobody
not
wants
boring.
to hear
what
that.
it is it makes no sense in the first place. Because what you're saying is he left because they won't understand what he's about to figure out. So what productive conversation happens when he comes back with answers that he already said you're not going to understand?
Fair, true. Very fair point. Very fair point.
So what I'm saying is I wouldn't have him leave, but to the extent that you think it's a good reason for him leaving, then what he does when he comes back makes the most sense.
Okay, that's fair. That's true. That is true. It's just, I'm like, we haven't seen, like, I just found it weird. Because this is why I'm saying everything
the initial leaving is weaker to me. Because
that's true.
What sets off the chain reaction of there can only be one thing that happens when he gets back, which is I don't care what you guys have to. And I'm not saying like it's what he does. I'm just saying like I wouldn't think it was a good idea for him to then be like, hey, all right, so what do you guys think? Like,
okay, like that perspective makes a lot more sense. He's like, hey, I'm trying to understand stuff that you couldn't possibly understand, and I want your input.
Yes,
it's like I to work on my actions. It doesn't make any sense. You're right. You're absolutely right. There's the one, like, I don't know, rewatching this movie, if this is stuff I noticed the first rewatch through and all that kind of stuff, but I was like, oh, when he's talking about the Infinity Stones, that cloud behind it kind of looks like a gauntlet. That's cool. That's neat.
Yeah, I thought that was on purpose, that it looked like a gauntlet.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely thought it was on
you're
purpose,
just saying,
but I just don't know if I pointed it out.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
But I'm like, that doesn't make a better movie just because I noticed like another Easter egg. But I'm like, hey, that's kind of cool. And like now when it's like watching the movie with, does it make my question is, now knowing Wanda the way she is, the amount of time we spent with her, how interesting and how in love with her story I am.
Mm-hmm.
Does this movie speak to Wanda differently now, or do you feel like it's just an awkward beginning for her, or how does it make you feel about Wanda now that we know what we know?
I don't feel anyone. The only thing was like when Quicksilver is talking about the bomb that didn't go off, and we know that's because she used some magic on, or maybe it was mutant powers on it so that it didn't go off, or that's what's implied in WandaVision. The way she's playing it makes it seem like she feels like she was responsible for it not going off, but then her line the next time she speaks makes it seem like, oh, okay, so she didn't know that she did anything. So that was the only thing that I felt was like, oh, like maybe she knew back then about what they were going to do in WandaVision, but I don't think so. I think they were always just playing it like that, and then the WandaVision writer decided to expand on that for for the show. But it doesn't make me feel more interested or less interested in her. I never really was that interested in her portrayal in this, and then I liked WandaVision, so I will see how I feel about her in Doctor Strange too, because I think I liked her in the show, and I'm not sure that it goes beyond me liking her in the show.
Right. I just feel like at this point in time in the MCU, you can't write her character as anything other than the overpowered villain that she will eventually is most likely to become, right?
I don't know.
It's
I,
everything. I
I
mean, we're
guess
used to
you
seeing
could-
it. What if? What, like, there's gonna be some zombie Wanda. It's gonna be fun. But it's this is what's so sad about it now. Seeing it's like, yeah, man, you never really got a break, and like seeing her connect with Vision before he was like, I can hear like he's dreaming. It's like she gets a smile on her face. Like it's nice to see that kind of stuff. It was like, oh, this is starting, and then to know that it goes to WandaVision, and it's like, oh, and like through Infinity
So-
War and Endgame, and what it always go through, what it's gonna go through is like, oh man, this is a little rough.
So what I noticed when she looked into his brain,
Mhm.
I like Joss Whedon seems like someone who would plant the seed of, oh, they're gonna be together, I'm gonna put something in there. But
Mhm.
it played more like the logic of the movie, which was she tried to read Ultron's brain and then was excited and smiled when she was like, oh, I can finally read what's in his brain now that this has developed. And
Mhm.
then when she looked and saw that he was going to nuke everything, she's like, hey, fuck you, and got angry. But I think you're right that there must be stuff planted there. But for me, it read more like the excitement of like, okay, I can finally, this has been the only unknown for me, and I can finally know what's
Yeah.
going on here.
Yeah. Because that's how it read to me. I'm like, was that more like a spark of a crush to you, or was that more like, oh, I actually can connect with this version of Ultron and can like see if this
That's how I
version of
took it.
Ultron is actually slamming us or whatever. And
That's how I took it.
right away it was like, yeah, he's slamming us. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Didn't have that much foresight there, Whedon.
Well, doesn't he save her at one point and then they look at each other, and is that Civil War? No, it's before Civil War that he does that. So it has to be in this movie at some point that he holds her and they connect for a moment.
Maybe. The Hawkeye stuff in this movie I found surprisingly strong this time. This rewatch I found surprisingly strong.
Up until they go to his house. And then
Well, yes,
not into this.
of course, but that's not his fault. But yes, up until they go to his house, it's like
I think
I
that
like
was
him a lot more
always
as a
strong
character.
for me.
Yeah.
Like the whole, I guess how he was talked about, less what he did.
Mhm.
Like I think this was the first time I was just like, when he's like, no one would know, and then he's like, I'm gonna shoot. I was like, but they would know. You're the only one that uses arrows. What do you mean? Like what? It felt like that Cap thing of like, oh, we're just gonna do comic book lines. I mean, It felt more like Die Hard, like John McClane in that moment, but still, like, it didn't feel true to his character in that sense. I'll give him the what you didn't see that coming. That felt better that when he shot the glass from under him and was like, what, you didn't see that? That felt good. That felt earned. And it did feel like the one-upsmanship that they were clearly doing. But then when he was like, I'm gonna kill her brother after we just connected on us being a team, I'm like, what? Like,
yeah,
no,
it's weird.
Just get that out of here.
Yeah, that was such
And
a
again,
weird
not
thing.
his fault. It's just the writing, like that they would sacrifice a moment they just had for that. Didn't feel
I like,
good.
I do like that he starts muttering some other stuff under his breath though. Like I'm just like, just leave it at that. I was like, just leave it at that. Just call him old and then let him like pace himself to the next thing. And I'm like, that's funny enough as it is. Just don't threaten to kill him. Like don't go like no one would know. I'm like, I get what they're trying to do, but it's just not. It doesn't execute well because it's just like it's a dumb thing.
Yeah,
but maybe it needed to be
100%
dumb.
People would know.
Yeah. Maybe it's like, oh, it's because it was so dumb that you knew that he was being sarcastic. I'm like, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, but it didn't work for me.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It didn't work for me. I'm like, you could just have him being like, sure, Hawkeye, do this, Hawkeye, do this, Hawkeye. And it would have been just as funny. Like,
also, I don't know, like it is weird watching it again after, like, especially after watching the Hawkeye series. His lines about like, I don't have a girlfriend. I'm like, just get to the wife
okay
stuff.
so
I don't like this. I don't like this for whatever reason. It seems like a waste of time for me.
I'm like, okay, technically she's not your girlfriend, she's your wife.
Yeah.
So yes, haha, funny.
I know,
but
I get that. Yeah,
I know, but what I'm saying is like, it's still weird because like later on he's like, who's that? He's like, my girlfriend. I'm like,
Yeah, on the phone. Yeah, I think it didn't
just
age well considering where they went with it, and it's kind of one of those things where like maybe I guess yeah, before we really got into, I think Endgame kind of like ruins it because you're just like, yeah, this guy's whole world is his family. So
yeah.
it's like a weird. I can't put that genie back in the bottle for this segment of the movie of like when you didn't know he had a family. It just is like, no, that's the Family Guy. So this all of it seems empty to me. Like it doesn't work, especially after watching Endgame and the Hawkeye series. None
Yeah.
of it works the same.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's just his stuff within the team is good. Outside the team, not so much. Not so much.
I guess we haven't talked about Tony. I don't know.
I don't know how.
I just like it. I know this is the movie that I think made people just be like, yeah, fuck this guy. But I was like, nah, he's still too charming for me. Like and I'm not saying this isn't like, oh, I hope I can be like him one day. Yes, I understand he's a jackass and he's reckless. It's just he is compelling to watch on screen. That's different from me thinking he is a good person.
He moves the plot along.
Yes, he is a good character that pushes things.
Yeah.
And I like to watch that as opposed to a nice person who doesn't push anything along.
Yeah. Some people, I get criticized sometimes, often by Stacey. It's like, why do you like this character? He's such a jackass. Do you like jackasses? I'm like, nobody's making this scene interesting, and it's all about entertainment value right now. I'm like, if we're talking about people we idolize, who are like, let's be honest here, we can really read into a lot of that kind of stuff. But this is just because he moves the plot along, and like, and this is this is what I was saying earlier with Cap. Like, he does put up an argument for why Ultron shouldn't be made, or why Vision shouldn't be made, and why we shouldn't be using this AI kind of thing. But he only has that one beat of like, okay, every time you try to stop a war before it starts, innocent people die. I'm like, well, once a war starts, innocent people die too. So it's just like, what has not been done before? It's been
think
Tony's
what's
thing.
good about that is that they're both right.
They are both right.
But also, I don't think that's not the one thing he's saying. What he's actually upset about is that he has, at this point, two team members that won't share stuff with him.
Right.
That the fact that Iron Man and Bruce, well, I guess it's three. I don't know why he doesn't consider Bruce also betraying him, because it starts with Thor and he's like, hey, where's he going? And he's like, he didn't tell me. I didn't think I was gonna have like, and I think they point out only two team members that now haven't told him what they're up to. But that is his frustration, and then he brings up a point about war. But it's all tied into war and like feeling like, again, it's still in reaction to something Tony's doing, but it is Ultron's point, which is they're not unified, and he is highlighting that by being like, I don't even know where Thor is going. You guys went off and made Ultron without ever like talking to us about it. I don't feel like I can trust my team. This is a problem. But again, it didn't feel like we went past that scene with that feeling, which is why I felt like it didn't really work. But yeah, I think that is more what's happening in the scene.
I get that.
Which is,
what I'm saying is
he has a real gripe, and then he tries to be like, well, this is theoretically why we shouldn't be doing what he's doing. And then there's the personal thing of, I can't trust my team.
And maybe and this is clearly the case, because Tony's argument was so much better that it even got Bruce Banner on board. So it needed to be very, very convincing. But I love the gripe of how manipulative it is. I love it, because like when he goes like, when Bruce goes like, don't tell me you're gonna need me to help you make this thing. It's like, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna help you do this. Like, that's amazing. It's so manipulative and funny. Oh, it's so good.
And I do think it's continuing what was happening in the first Avengers, which is Tony's desire to have Bruce not be so shy about who he is, and to have Bruce be just as bombastic as him, and like, well, at least when it comes to the science that they're working on, maybe not personality wise, but like, hey, you're a smart person,
Take some
Um,
risks. Have some fun with me.
yeah, don't dim your light for other people. Like,
Yeah, don't let anyone dull your sparkle, Bruce.
yeah, and I'm not saying that to be like, so it's not manipulative. He is being manipulative, but I think that it's coming from a place of like him seeing what Bruce could be and being like,
Right.
I hate that you tried to like hide yourself from people.
Yes. I mean, like, let's be perfectly honest here. Everyone in the world is capable of manipulation. It just depends what you're trying to get. Sometimes you're like, hey guys, let's all try to watch Star Wars together and manipulate a whole bunch of people to watch Star Wars with you. Or whether or not it's like, oh, we're manipulating Bruce to break out of his shell a little bit more, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it's varying degrees of manipulation. But in this situation, it's just, yeah, you're right. I think he's just like, hey, I connect with someone intellectually, be a little bit more daring like me, because he once, and it's clear that Tony yearns for that, because once he meets Peter, he actually gets that connection and that relationship, and he gets it to the ability where he's like, oh, of course a kid's going to listen to me. Of course I can be condescending because I have that power and ego, like, above him and all this kind of stuff. So it's a perfect relationship. And he kind of backs off Hulk entirely. So it makes so much sense that he needs a buddy that he can actually,
I mean, to be fair, timing wise, Hulk is gone, so that's not really him backing off. He's just doesn't have
right.
him.
But he's not. What I'm saying is he's less successful with Hulk than he's much more successful with Peter doing it, obviously. But like, it's he wants someone that's on his same level.
I understand what you're saying, but I think it's two different things.
Yeah,
I think there's a difference between wanting a partner and a difference between I can mold this person.
I was just talking about someone to connect with him intellectually from the science standpoint.
But that's
he's all
alone
on
it's
that
two different
standpoint.
things. You can't boil it down to just that.
I don't think it's about control, or I just think it's about, someone else sees how smart I am and I can, work on this level. I think that's what it, like, to me, that's what it reads, right? Not really the idea of like, I like this person because of, like, it's just, I can speak this person's language. Like he says in the first one, it's like, finally someone that speaks English. And then he's like,
yes.
like,
which
he
is
just likes
why,
that.
which is why I'm saying it's different with Spider-Man, because what Spider-Man is, it's not that long of a trip, but it is him working through his paternal instincts.
Yes,
that's not what's happening with Bruce, especially if you think of the Iron Man 3 post-credit where he's like upset that Bruce not actually listening to the story he's telling, because
of course
he wants a partner there. That's him wanting a partner versus wanting to mold something. And I think that's two different things, because it's not about being equal or even speaking the same way, because realistically what he wants is for Spider-Man to speak like him. He's not noticed, like, he's got the roots there, but he's not like, hey, I'll meet you on your level. Everything is on his terms. So I'm not hugging you, I'm opening the door. Move your leg, I'm gonna sit down. That's not the same thing as what he was doing with Bruce.
So what you're saying is that he just wants to have his ego in other people. He wants to influence other people. Is like, okay, I made Bruce
that is a part of
like
parenting,
me.
right? Like, you're the ego that you are going to,
right?
So I don't know that because when you said one thing about like he wants his
I was saying he wants to connect with the intellectual side of things, but then you're saying he wants to mold in one, and like, either way, I'm just saying, like, he likes these relationships because he's connected at that intellectual level with these people.
I think it's different with Peter, because I think that's more of a,
that is definitely more
less about intellectual. That is about feelings.
Yeah,
I think,
and I do like how he's like, I'm trying to, like, he in one of the movies he says like, I'm trying to break the cycle of like hurt or whatever like that.
Yeah.
And like,
he is trying to be emotionally available in that. He's not good at it at first, but I definitely think it's two separate things, because
fair enough,
it's two different objectives.
I just like that he has these moments and connects with people that are more of that intellectual side of things. And then when he clashes with Doctor Strange, he's like, no, I'm clashing with you. I don't speak the same language. You're about medicine, I'm about tech. It's funny, but it's like recognize game. Tony is great in this, but he has to be, because it's his whole movie in the sense where he's the compelling.
Everyone, as we said, deals with their fear, even if it's just for one scene. But it's his fear that's pushing for Ultron and creates the villain of the movie.
Yeah, he is the plot driver.
I think the first time I saw the movie, I was like, oh, good, Nick Fury's here. And then this time I'm kind of like, what even do you do these days? Like, I understand that he's like off the radar now. He's not going to be full Nick Fury mode, but it's just like, yeah, I just think this time I just wasn't that excited about that. I really still like the War Machine stuff. I wish he was less of a butt of the joke, but the MCU is not really interested in that. But I like that he was there. I like Falcon showing up because it was my big problem with the first Avengers movie. I was like, where are all the black people? There are black people in these movies. But yeah, I think it was not a great viewing, but some of the stuff I like still held up. Like I do like some of the fight choreography for Cap. Like,
the fight choreography is always going to be one of the better things in Marvel movies. I think this one, I always am in awe of that one wide shot, that long shot beginning? Of them in the in the church.
Oh, okay,
yeah, where they like, that like I'm always like,
where
oh
the
my
drill
god,
is.
like, where they're like just weaving in and out of the scene, doing like their special, like, oh, I'm gonna do my special finisher right now, and then I'm gonna weave out of the scene real. It's just like one of the coolest like images, like just scenes or cinematography. It's a great image.
I agree.
I love that fight choreography, and I like so cool.
The title sequence at the end gives you like busts of that fight scene. I think that's really cool.
Yes, I want that so bad.
Yeah,
like if that actually existed, I would want it in my house, because that's like classy nerdy stuff that I can have now, as opposed to like, oh, that's just a lot of Funko Pop toys.
I do like Ultron. I know people think he's too jokey, but it's right up my alley. I
love Ultron.
I don't have anything negative to say about him. I'm really happy that it's played exactly like that. And I think that also just is a benefit of not knowing him from the comics. I'd seen him in Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes. So it's not like I'd never seen a version of him before, but I was just like, I'm just into this I like that he, like, especially that time where he's like, yeah, man always creates what he fears. Like people who want peace create wars, like and then adults create smaller children. I like, because it is like he's all learning this, like for the first, it's all coming to him within days. He's not, he hasn't actually lived the life. It's still like coming to him, and I like that quirk about him, and that there are moments where he is still the child that he is. Like when he gets angry at Claw for being like, yeah, you're one of Tony's things, and he's like, don't compare, and like rips off his arm.
Yeah, and then he's apologizes.
He's
like,
just the apology. I love the apology, because I'm like, I think he is genuinely like, that is bad. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's a temper tantrum.
Mocking him. Yeah, but I'm still like, it's like, even if he is mocking him, that's cool. But I think he is kind of genuine. Like, yeah, okay, sorry about that. Sorry.
Oh, he genuinely
get over
is.
it. But like, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. There's nothing I can really do to change the outcome right now.
Millions of dollars. Like, you'll get over it.
Yeah, he's like, I'm not. I'm also not killing you. And yes, I just wire transferred you so much money and all that kind of stuff. Like, you're right. There's so much about Ultron to me that's just so childlike, that is hilarious. Same thing with Vision too, right? Like that amazing line where it's like, where Ultron was like, you can't possibly be that naive, and then he's like, well, I was born yesterday, and just like wipes him out. I'm like, yes, that's an awesome line. It's so good. But like the idea of like, no, him having a temper tantrum, but having the advanced AI processing capabilities of being able to, like, in real time, oh wait, shit, I'm sorry, I didn't know what I just did. I'm really genuinely sorry. And then he's like, but why would you do that? Why would you compare me to this? Like, I have all this power and you're just insulting me. What are you doing? Like, don't be silly.
One thing that used to be good for me, but then kind of like the Hawkeye being like, I'm gonna kill thing, was when Ultron says, "I'm so glad you asked because I wanted to take this time to explain my evil plan." I'm like, but he doesn't think he's being evil. He's certainly not caring, but it's weird. It's the
Yeah.
thing, right? Like I used to think that was funny, but then in the moment thinking, I'm like, but wait, the whole movie only works if you believe that
That
he's
you're
so
the good
dangerous
guy.
because
Yeah.
he thinks doing the right thing is getting rid of these people.
Mhm.
It's not that he's doing it to be mean or evil. It doesn't.
Yeah.
So it's just like, nah. Yeah, that
Because
kind of that's a bummer. Like I only really felt that way this time. That it's just like, nah, that like I get the humor of the line, but
yeah.
they were already doing so well with the whole like, oh, you gotta make some
Yeah.
extra guy, and he's like, I was just about to say that you beat me, or like all of that
Yeah.
stuff is fun. But then when he gets to, I'm so glad you asked because I
Mhm.
wanted to take this time to. I'm like, but you don't think you're evil. You think he's the bad guy.
Right.
So you making the joke in that way only works in the movie. It doesn't work in your actual reality.
Right. Right. Like there's I get what you're saying because I heard this quote one time and it's always resonated true to me that every villain is the hero of their own story. Like everyone ultimately believes that they're the ones that are doing good, right? So if you look at the story of Star Wars, you have like a rebel militant terrorist group that's disrupting a government oppressive government organization. It's like, okay, depending on perspective there, you could be like, okay, if you're for the empire, then the rebels are the villains. And
Yeah.
if you're for the rebels, then the empire are the villains. It's about perspective. It always is. But for him to break that fourth wall and to say that I'm the villain of your story is where it's incoherent and it doesn't make sense. You're absolutely correct about that. I would have loved better if he was like, well, let me take this time to explain my plan and then just like and then just attacks anyways. Like if they took evil out of there,
Mhm.
I would be very, very happy with that. But if they leaving it there doesn't work because I think there's other instances where it works a lot better, but they're ultimately saying very, very similar things. Like when Bane goes like to Daggett's like, you're evil. And then he goes like, I'm necessary evil because he's like, he genuinely believes what he's doing temporarily is going to suck, but
Yeah,
better
like
for
to
the
you,
entire
this is
world.
evil, but this is
Yes,
necessary to me.
exactly. It's like this is necessary for the greater good. This is what the League of Assassins have been doing or the whole time or whatever. But back to this is what Ultron thinks is like, if you want peace, this is how we get it. And
yeah,
everyone wants
you're
peace.
stopping
So
peace
there
by
we go.
trying to keep status quo.
Exactly. And
Um,
that's the situation for every hero like movie. It's just like, oh, the villain wants change and the
well,
hero is
good
fighting for
villains. I would
status.
say that
Yes,
there are movies where you're like, well, this guy just is a
this guy's a bum.
mustache twirling evil. Like,
Yeah, this guy is just a dick.
yeah, it's just he's just evil because they need a bad guy. But like,
Yeah,
um,
in most well-written
but
villains.
well written villains are the
Yeah,
people where you could be like, well, yeah, they have a point, or
they're
at
instruments of
least
change. Yeah,
even if you don't think they have a point, you understand that like
yeah,
they're never going to stop what they're doing because they're so convinced that what they're doing is the
yes.
right thing.
Think Killmonger. Think like all these are people like Killmonger legitimately will not stop. Um,
Yeah,
so like
he's
death was
got
the
it.
only fitting end for him.
But yeah, I think we should rate this movie.
Mm-hmm. I feel like we're hold on. Let's talk about Vision real quick.
I was really trying to not talk about Vision, but okay.
Why is that?
I don't care. I've never liked Vision. He's the
Really?
worst part of everything.
Why?
He's
Why?
good in WandaVision. I'll say that.
Why?
That's the
Why is
first
he?
time I've ever liked
He
him.
is one of the most compelling characters to me. Why
In
is he the
comics.
worst?
In comics, he's great. In the movies, I don't care.
I understand. Okay, explain yourself a little. Why he's so compelling of a character. Like
Why?
the moment he lifts Thor's hammer, he's got me glued to him. Like every single thing. I
It's
don't
a
understand
moment.
why you just.
It's a moment, and I'm like, okay, cool. Like it means it ultimately means nothing, and for me until Civil War, when
Yes.
and we're gonna do that next. So like, or not next, but we're doing that soon. So I'll get to it there. But my point being, like, you're setting up that he is just ultimately good and be above reproach, sure. But then what's interesting about that?
I think what's interesting about it is what lengths he's willing to go to do it. But I mean, it's a very interesting. I just his ability to, and this is obviously not talking about this movie, but the ability for him in WandaVision with anti-vision or white vision or whatever you want to call the other vision to do the debate in the middle of the fight is like, wait, I want to have this philosophical debate in the middle of a fight right now. It's one of the only characters that can ever do it convincingly and not be like, oh my God, now the fight stopped. It's just like legitimately part of his character is like, no, the fight's continuing, but with words now. And that's exciting. But like, obviously,
as I said, I like him in WandaVision. I don't think giving me an example from WandaVision is proving your point that he's good. Like I said, he's good in WandaVision. I've never cared about him up until WandaVision.
I just find him so compelling. He's like one of my favorite Avengers that I'm just like, it's shocking to me. They're like, I don't like him at all. I think.
What do you like? You liked what he did in WandaVision, but what is an
I
example of? Okay, he lifted the hammer.
Yep, he lifted the hammer. The fight. He's just like the way he was fighting was just like, whoa! I've never seen anything like this. He could phase in and out of stuff. Like that's really, really freaking cool to me. He's obviously an overpowered character. I have feelings and thoughts about overpowered characters because it's like, oh great, like nothing can hurt you except for yourself or whatever you subject yourself to. But the idea of like him being half human but trying so desperately to be human, it doesn't come across in this movie, and it builds up throughout.
I didn't think he was any part human.
Well, I mean, he's human enough in terms of the Tony and the Bruce Banner thinking side of things. Like he's that, like, because with Wanda,
their brainwaves are mapped onto him. Okay,
fair enough, but like he's human enough to be like, but he's the fact that he's trying to be human to me is like, it's just this wonderful, hilarious thing. Like when he's wearing clothes in the Avengers facility, and this is like later on, but like it's hard to talk about him specifically in this movie because of everything I love out there, but like I see it here and I love everything that I see about Vision here, that it's kind of surprising that you're like, yeah, I don't care about this character whatsoever.
As I said, I like him in WandaVision, and I think there's a very interesting moment in Civil War, which we've talked about over text that you disagree with, but I think if you disagree with it, it just kind of proves my point that he's not that interesting until WandaVision.
Fair enough.
But yeah, as I said, we'll get to it in Civil War because it is a very interesting moment. If people don't want to wait till then, it's how he, like Steve, stops being this like thing of virtues because of someone he loves, which is Wanda. So I like that turn for him, but I'm not like invested in past what I saw in WandaVision. I was just like, yeah, this is a really good use of this character, and it made me care about him, but I did not actually care about him before that.
But yeah, I mean, it's hard to care about someone that doesn't have those humanistic mistakes that make someone human, right? He's pretty much perfect up until that point, except for like a couple of funny things like you face through the wall, and he's like, oh, but I thought the door was open. So
yeah, it's a lot of telling me he's perfect, and I'm not even saying like, oh, like I think he's flawed. I'm just saying like, you lifted the hammer, that's shorthand for he's perfect, but like then I just feel like it doesn't matter what's happening with him past that. Like okay, great, he's perfect, he lifted the hammer, and it doesn't really factor into anything else until a key moment in Civil War for me.
Well, we'll have to agree to disagree on that because he's one of the most compelling things. Once the moment he got his body, I was like, yes, it's go time, baby. It's gonna be fun. I loved it. It was so much fun to me. But to also think like, wait, Ultron was gonna look like that? That would have been weird. You know what I mean? I'm like, if Ultron was ultimately gonna look like that, I'm like, oh, that would have been so uncomfortable.
I guess so.
Because then the villain becomes a little bit more human, right? Like that's my thing. Like,
wasn't he just gonna look like the Ultron from What If?
No, in that final, like if Ultron was successful in uploading his AI into the body
Vision
of
took on a bunch
Vision,
of looks
right?
based on when he saw like he took on a mind of his own, like once he wasn't strictly attached to Ultron.
Right.
And I believe that, like, and I know they only show it with the cape, but it's like he came out looking a certain way and then took a look at Thor and did the cape thing, and I feel like he readjusts color schemes as well. Like, I don't think he was gonna just look like that as Ultron.
Are you talking about Vision or are you talking about Ultron?
Vision?
So kind of like the tech that Captain Marvel has with her suit. She can just like adapt and change her colors and all that kind of stuff. Like, you think that's what Vision ultimately Vision is like a comment.
It's on screen. Yeah, it's not something I think. I saw him like adjust
Right.
his color.
I guess yeah, okay. I guess I never paid attention to that. It's just one of those things. I'm like, I always
taking
assume
in
that
what he sees.
Ultron,
he obviously, and it's again something where I was just like, I feel like Vision and Thor never have connection past this brief moment, but Thor is the person who ushered him into the world, which is why he takes a look at Thor and tries to readjust to what he looks like. But then again, it's kind of like even the movie is kind of like, yeah, but that was just for this. Like, no one really picks up on the thread of the connection Thor and Vision have. It's even Thor being like, Vision gets to keep, I'm saying he gets to keep the gem because he lifted the hammer. Like, all of this is like, it's Thor's vision. I know that Ultron even says like, oh, they took my vision from me, but it becomes Thor's vision, but they're not really interested in that either. It's kind of, as I said, he doesn't really feel like anything until they really lean into the Wanda stuff.
I see what you're saying. I don't know. I really like Vision in this, but I can see why you're saying that too. For sure. All right.
All right. Do you want to rate it, or did you have anything?
Yeah, no, I think we're at rating time.
All right. Well, you can go first.
I'm giving this a 7. I still had fun.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's lower than what I gave it originally, but
I feel like we gave it such a high mark on the first. We were just on the high of
seeing
another Avengers movie, specifically Avengers, not just a Marvel movie.
Oh, hell, this one has fallen.
Yeah,
you're right, though. It was like, yeah, Avengers 2, let's go.
I'll give it a 6.5. You give it a 7. I give it a 6.5.
Yeah. Right there.
All right.
Solid B, C movie.
Yeah. Well, genuinely don't know when people are going to hear this. It's in the books. So enjoy this whenever you hear it. We are part of the That Shelf Podcast Network, which means we're on the same network as other great shows like Bad Gay Movies, Black Hole Films, Changing Reels, a whole bunch of great shows. So go there, you'll find to thatshelf.com, that is, you'll find our show, the shows I just mentioned. You'll find more shows, so it's a good time. And you can find older episodes, including our first review of Age of Ultron, at tdfeverything.com/goldrotten. And we're on all sorts of podcast places like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Radio Public, Google Podcasts. So please, if we are where you are, rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends. If we're not, our Twitter is at TDFSpoiled. You can tweet at us, and our email is spoiledpodcast@gmail.com. You can email us. So those are 2 great ways to contact us. Other than that, have a great day.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.